Peace and love, everybody. So, I'm also going to switch up because I wanted to take a moment, still in the spirit of Black love, to talk about love in the archive and particularly um, the kind of record, which is the wedding certificate, the marriage license. That's a type of document that we can use to uh, get into the stories of our family history, to get to know our ancestors through genealogy and family history research. And I'm just doing a brief share because having this document, the marriage license, certainly helped me to unlock some more information about a female ancestor, my paternal great grandmother. Um, just based on that marriage license, it had more information for me that was not readily accessible. So just sharing that, but also wanting to talk a little bit about why our ancestors' stories matter, and ways that we can use their lives and place their lives within the historical context of the times in which they live. And so a little bit of my background, I was adopted. And so being adopted, I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Closed adoption, that meant that my records were sealed, my birth records were sealed, and up until 2016 I had no legal right to access that information. And so in 2016 there was key legislation that passed in the state of Missouri, known as the Missouri Adoptee Rights Act, which granted adult adoptees whose adoptions occurred after 1921, it granted us the legal right to obtain our original birth certificate, which is important because that is the document that will include your original birth name. So people know me as Danielle, but my birth name was Angela Frazier, and it also included my birth parents, well, my birth mother. Something that sometimes happens that I have found just learning more about closed adoptions is that sometimes the birth father will be omitted. Sometimes that's intentional, but I just wanted to note that. But because her surname, her last name differed from mine, that made my search for my biological family, for my birth parents, a little bit easier. And so from that, obviously, I've had the opportunity to not only get to meet my birth parents and my siblings and my extended family, but to stay connected with them, and get to know bits and pieces of family history, what is known, what is remembered, but to take that information and to begin doing this work, which is building my family tree and getting to know my ancestors through genealogy and family history research, which is very important to me because it's something that for most of my life I never really thought that I would ever be able to do. And so I consider it a great blessing to be able to do that, to be the curator of my family's history, to be able to get into these stories and to celebrate them and honor them. And a part of telling their story is just looking at their lives. And also, I'm doing this share because there are a lot of important conversations that are being had right now, particularly around Black identities here in America. And the thing for me is that we know collective history, collective Black American history, but the other truth is, when we say, Black culture is not monolithic. It's not, and neither are our family history. So yes, there is, collectively what has happened, but then there's the micro history. What is the story of what happened within your family line? what happened between the people who birthed the people who birthed the people who birthed the people who eventually birthed you. And so when we approach it from that perspective and begin to do the work of going back, we might find some information that was not previously, known or privy to us, be it through a combination of paper research, but also through DNA testing. And so for me, particularly on my paternal line, my grandfather, he was from New York. He was born in New York. But he was the son of two immigrants who came to New York, Harlem, by way of Jamaica. And there is no point in, even in my adoptee imagination that I would have, considered, because I'm from the Midwest, but I had never considered that I might have, ancestors who lived in New York. And I think about all the times that I've traveled to New York and felt very comfortable, like a sense of, to be familiar, but also going to Harlem and to know that that's where my grandfather and my great grandparents, lived, and to think about them, and also that this was where my great grandparents were married, so to have this document that that sheds light on where they were from and who their parents were, and where they were married. They were married at Mount Olivet Baptist Church, that is still standing at 201 Lenox Avenue, which is present day Malcolm X Boulevard. And it's like, I've walked past that church before without any knowledge or knowing that, that was this place where my ancestors were married, and so it is a great sense of pride and feeling. But I also, wanted to kind of highlight this too, because when we think about, history, and we think about the Harlem Renaissance, particularly, this is the interwar period, so the period between World War I and World War II. But this is also the era of the first wave of the Great Migration. So this is when many Black Americans were fleeing the South en masse, going into these urban industrial centers, one, for their safety, but also in search of better job opportunities or available job opportunities, and also for housing, which they didn't often, weren't given what what was being advertised, but they made a way out of no way. And that is also the story of how people ended up, in Harlem, and how Harlem becomes a major urban center and Black cultural mecca during this period. So Harlem in the 1920s is the space of, the era of the new Negro. This is the era of Zora Neale Hurston. This is the era of Alain Locke. This is the era of many Black writers and intellectuals and poets and all of the things, activism. This is the birthplace, Marcus Garvey and the United Negro Improvement Association. So, the birth of Pan-Africanism, all of this is going on. And to think about that time period, a few reels back, I had did a reading of a poem by Claude McKay, who's one of the major poets of the Harlem Renaissance. But he was from Jamaica, so he was an immigrant, and still, a Black identity, but a Black immigrant identity. And him being a part of the Harlem Renaissance also represents another story that I feel has sometimes been overlooked, and it's even by me, until I got into the story of my great grandparents. I had never really considered the wave of West Indians, of Black West Indians who came to the United States, and particularly who went to Harlem between 1900 and 1930. So that's something that I have had to, take into consideration and think about in terms of, what it was like for my great grandparents when they came, and they didn't come together, and so presumably they probably met while they were in Harlem, just in community. That's what I'm assuming. Maybe they knew each other before, but I say that to say that these are the things that we begin to extract. And the interesting thing too, like, my great grandfather, even though he was from Jamaica, he actually came by way of Cuba. He was in Camagüey province. And so looking at, records like the passenger list from that time, like it's just like wow, like they were also seeking. And this is an important time too, I'm going to say, for people who may have West Indian heritage, because Cuba was very important during that time. We hear about the Panama Canal and different job opportunities, but Cuba had what the sugar industry, but also I think what the United, if I'm not mistaken, the United Fruit Company. And so a lot of West Indians went to Cuba because there were job opportunities there. So I'm not sure how long my great grandfather was there, or and when he got there, but that is where he was before he came here to the United States. But both of them came through Ellis Island. And even when I think about, Ellis Island and some of the archival footage and visuals that I have seen, very rarely do I recall, seeing Black people who came through Ellis Island, and so that becomes something else that I'm taking into consideration when we talk about, the contributions and Black identities here in the United States. Sometimes it can become very complex when we begin to delve into our own personal family histories, and sometimes you really don't know where it's going to take you or where it will lead you. And that is also true when we begin to delve into DNA. So I just wanted to do that brief share and just let you know that there are important documents. One of the reasons that I'm mentioning this, the wedding license and certificate, because while I had knowledge of it, and it was technically it was available on familysearch.org, which is free to use. It was only indexed. And so what ended up happening was I received a tip from somebody who manages two accounts of two DNA relatives that I am matched to on Ancestry, and he was basically alerting me. This is how the ancestors work, y'all. He was alerting me that I needed to review my tree, particularly around my great grandmother. And because she died relatively young, so she was my great grandfather's first wife. She passed in 1930. She died in Montego Bay. And so I only had like her passenger list when she came to the country, and also I found her death record. That's all I pretty much had about her, information wise. But receiving that tip from the guy on Ancestry prompted me to order, because as a researcher you need primary source documentation. And so even if it's indexed, you want to always make sure that what you see on Family Search is what is actually on the physical document. So I had to pay the nominal fee and request these documents. And once I got them, it was just like, wow, because no wonder I hadn't found other information about my great grandmother, because the name that she went by, and that was on, different records, is not the name that is on her birth record in Jamaica. And in fact, her given name is just like a shorthand version of her middle name. So it was all of this stuff. And many people will find that too. Like sometimes you might be searching for ancestors by the name that they were known by, but that might not be what is on the birth record. Also true of my great grandfather. So this is information that really helped me to identify specifically where she was born in Jamaica, which also let me help me to identify who her parents were, to confirm that, and to also eventually help me locate where she was buried in Jamaica. So all of that has been a very positive experience for me, and that's what I wanted to share. The importance of documents, and this is Love in the Archive. I think it's important because from their union, again, because even though she died relatively early, my grandfather was about three when she passed, but from their union, my grandfather was the only child that survived. And I just think that that's very powerful because I am I'm not just by myself. I have siblings, but it's like I'm a part of that legacy of love. And I give thanks for that. I give thanks for being in this space to be able to delve into their lives and to be able to remember them and to give them light. And so that's why I share our ancestors. Their stories are important. So I hope that encourages more people to, get into it. Peace.